Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Arfat and welcome to a brand new video. In today's video, I'd like to share with you a content from this book, Manuscripts of the Greek Bible, an introduction to paleography. This is by the late Professor Bruce Metzger. This is a very important book, no doubt a very brief and short book. This book gives you an introduction to Greek manuscripts. Now, this book was written about 40 years back or so, and ever since then, there are a lot of other books around the same price range, and in fact, way cheaper. And you can get more details, so to speak. Okay, but nevertheless, this book is still a very important reference or a very important study that is published by Oxford. Okay, published by Oxford University Press, and it's a very, very important book, so which is why I would like to make a video about this. Okay. Oxford University Press. Right. I'll make a separate video as to what are the literatures of the same range, so on and so forth. So I have a lot of ideas for videos, but it's just that I've been very, very busy, and so it's very difficult to try and find the time. But anyway, here is from page 33, special features of the biblical manuscripts. This is a very important chapter because, especially for those people interested to get into textual criticism and to know what are the some terminologies that are being used and what do they actually mean, right? So for example, here we have the tetragrammaton. The tetragrammaton. So what is it? What is a tetragrammaton, right? The tetragrammaton or tetragram is a term denoting the mystic and ineffable name of God written in Hebrew. Okay, in English we call them Yahweh or YHWH, with the vowels omitted. It was and still is considered irreverent to pronounce the name, meaning it is like prohibited, so to speak, to pronounce the name. Yeah, because the name is so holy. This name Yahweh is so holy that Jews avoid pronouncing the name and they would change it to a different name. Okay. For example, when reading the Hebrew scripture, it became customary to substitute the word Adonai, which is Lord, literally my Lord. Okay. When the vowel points were added to the Hebrew consonantal text, the vowels of Adonai or Adonai were accordingly given to the tetragrammaton. When writing the sacred name, devout scribes at Qumran would sometimes use Paleo-Hebrew script for the 4 letters, okay, while writing the rest of the scripture text in ordinary Hebrew or using Aramaic characters. Hebrew or Aramaic characters. At a later date, the tetragrammaton was occasionally written in the letters of gold, okay, though Tanaitic or Tanakh books, so on and so forth, or people involved in writing the Tanakh, sages condemned such a practice. Okay, so great was the desire to preserve intact the sacred name of God that Hellenistic Jews, when translating the Hebrew Bible into Greek, also known as the Septuagint, which basically the Septuagint is the Hebrew Bible in Greek. Okay. So when translating the Hebrew Bible into Greek, copied the actual letters of the tetragrammaton in the midst of the Greek text. Okay, so when scribes who want to translate the Hebrew Bible into the Greek language, they would write every other letters in Greek, but when it comes to the letter Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh or Yahweh, they would actually use the Hebrew script, right? Okay. So great was the desire to preserve intact the sacred name of God that Hellenistic Jews, when translating the Hebrew Bible into Greek, copied the actual letters of the Tetragrammaton in the midst of the Greek text. Several kinds of such representation have survived, of which the following may be mentioned. Okay. The oldest known manuscripts of the Septuagint that presents the Tetragrammaton is a very fragmentary papyrus roll of Deuteronomy, dating from the 1st century BC, before Christ. The more than 100 surviving fragments of the Greek text, okay, in Deuteronomy of chapters 17 to 33, preserve 31 instances of the name, the Tetragrammaton, written in square Hebrew letters. Okay. So on and so forth. Okay. And so the rest of the book for this section actually gives an example, okay, which I don't think describing to you will actually give you an idea at all, right? So best for you to consult Google and to see the images yourself. Okay. Next is the Nomina Sacra or Nomina Sacra. Okay. During the first centuries of the church, Christian scribes developed a system of contractions for certain sacred words. These Nomina Sacra, as the Latin paleographer Ludwig Traube called them, eventually came to include 15 such terms. Some were contracted by writing. Contracted basically means, for example, if you have a very long word, you just use short form. That's what basically it means. Okay. Some were contracted by writing only the first and the last letters. Okay. For example, Theos, Kurios, Isos, Christos, and Uios. Others by writing only the first two and the last letters. Okay, like Pneuma, David, okay, Mather, so on and so forth. Or the first and last two letters, Pater, okay, Israel, or Soter. Still others by writing the first and last syllables, okay, Anthropos, okay, Jerusalem, or Jerusalem, and Uranos. Okay. In order to draw the reader's attention to the presence of a nomen sacrum, okay, nomina sacra, the scribe would place a horizontal line above the contraction. In the developed Byzantine usage, the 15 nomina sacra in their nominative and genitive forms are as follows. Okay, so this is worth showing you, right? If we can go here, for example, Theos. Okay, Theos, they just write with a short form. Okay, Kurios, Isos, Christos, Uios, Pneuma, David. Okay. So on and so forth, Uranos, so on and so forth. Okay, so basically they will draw a line, and then this basically means that there's a contraction. The most famous one, and I've made video about this, whereby I read the chapters from the Vatican's Bible. They uses a lot of contractions. Okay, so basically that's what it is in principle. Okay. The rest are all going through examples. The rest of the pages of the book goes through examples. Okay. Next is the hexaplayric signs. Okay. Origen's monumental edition of the Old Testament, the massive 10,000 page hexapla, okay, set forth 6 transcriptions of the entire Old Testament in parallel columns. Okay. Normally the Hebrew text, its transliteration into Greek letters, the extremely literalistic Greek translation made in the first half of the 2nd century by Aquila, a Jewish proselyte. Fourth, the freer Greek translation made in the latter part of the 2nd century by Symmachus, and Ebionite Christian. Symmachus was an Ebionite Christian. And fifth, the Septuagint translation made in the 3rd and 2nd centuries BCE, before the Common Era, or BC, before Christ. And 6, the free revision of the Septuagint made in the 2nd century AD Anno Domini, or CE, during the Christian era, by Theology, variously described as a Jewish proselyte by Irenaeus, and also an Ebionite Christian by Jerome, or follower of Marcion, so by Epiphanius. Besides these four Greek translations, in certain sections of the Old Testament, Origen included the text of 3 other Greek versions, thus providing in these sections a total of 9 columns. Right, so imagine you have a book here and 9 columns, one with the original Greek text, one with the translation, okay, one with the transliteration, so on and so forth. Okay, so besides these 4 Greek translations, in certain sections of the Old Testament, Origen included the 3 other texts of the Greek versions. Okay, and so we have 9 columns in total. According to Eusebius, one of these anonymous versions was discovered during the reign of Caracalla, okay, which reigned from 211 to 217 CE, buried in an earthenware jar at Jericho. They found this Origen's hexapla. Okay. Employing the critical science invented by Aristarchus and other scholars at the famed Alexandrian library, Origen marked the text of the Septuagint to show its exact relation to the Hebrew. All words and paragraphs in the Septuagint which were not represented in the Hebrew, he marked the text of the Septuagint to show its exact relation to the Hebrew. Okay. All words and paragraphs in the Septuagint which were not represented in the Hebrew, he marked with an obelisk, straight line. All lacunae in the Greek on the other hand, were filled in from one of the other translations, mostly from the Theologian work, and marked with an asterisk. Okay. 2 points, which is the dot, right, indicate the end of each textual change. Okay. If something had been wrongly translated in the Septuagint, the correct rendering was inserted either by itself or behind the one marked with an obelisk. Okay, straight line. Yeah, this work takes 15 years for Origen to finish or accomplish. Okay. But the hexapletic signs like the obelisk mark, the semicolon marks, the 2 dots, the asterisk marks, okay, all these are actually introduced by Origen. Alright, so we go to the other features here, the superscription and subscriptions. Okay, this is the most common one. So what are they? In the oldest manuscripts of the Greek Bible, the titles of several books tend to be short and simple. Okay, for example, Kata Mattheon, okay, Kata Markon, so on and so forth. Okay, Ioannou, okay, which is John. In later copies, these titles became longer and more complex. Okay. For example, To Kata Mattheon, Agion Evangelium. Okay. And so in the earlier manuscripts, the title of the Gospels or the title of the book is basically Ioannou, okay, meaning John, Gospel according to John, or Kata Markon, Gospel according to Mark, okay, Kata Mattheon, Kata Lucan. And so later on it became a very complex title. Okay, the title became much longer. Okay, the subscriptions appended to the end of the books were originally like the titles, brief and simple. Okay, and this is also found in Vaticanus. Okay, but by the end of the Gospel, you have the title of the book. In the course of time, these two became more elaborate, okay, the subscriptions. Okay. And so, yeah, basically the rest of the portion here basically gives example. Okay, So superscriptions and subscriptions to begin with. The subscriptions title added at the end of the book, okay, and then the superscriptions added, like just like what you have in your modern Bible, King James, ESV, RSV. You have the title of the book first. Chapter divisions and headings. If you are familiar with Sinaiticus and Vaticanus, you'll know that there's no separation of words, right? There's no spaces, right? So on and so forth. But we do have headings. Yeah, we might not necessarily have chapter divisions, but we have headings. Though chapter division is something that is kind of disputed because what it can mean a lot of things. Okay? You do not necessarily need like chapter of line that says chapter 1, chapter 2, because if you end a certain verse a certain way, people can interpret the following verse as to be from the next chapter. Okay? Mostly it is also because of the content, the narrative. Okay? For example, there is a transition of story, for example, the passion narrative, as well as the birth narrative in Matthew and Luke. This can be considered as different chapter, right? Not necessarily the chapter that we understand today in our modern sense, over chapter 1, chapter 2, right? These are all invented in the 16th centuries. But basically, chapter in the past basically means section, so to speak. Like the story is about this, and then the story changes, and then you have a transition. The best example, and this is actually emulated by Raymond Brown in his Anchor Bible commentary, he has a transition chapter. And so Raymond Brown tries to emulate how it is actually done in the past, okay? Or what it seems to have been done in the past, according to the understanding that we have. So chapter divisions and headings. In order to assist readers at an early period, the books of the Greek Bible were divided into chapters. In Septuagint manuscripts, the variety of such systems of divisions, okay, seems to be nearly as numerous as the capitulated copies of the Septuagint. And this suggests that they were drawn up independently by a number of different scribes or editors. Because, for example, Sinaiticus, several scribes have been identified, at least 3, minimum 3, have been identified to have actually produced or copied Codex Sinaiticus. Chapter division, in New Testament manuscripts, 4 ancient systems of division have been preserved. The oldest system, which is known to us, is that contained in Codex Vaticanus, okay, or Vaticanus, of unknown origin. Okay? The division into sections was made with reference to break in the sands. Okay? So basically, what I've described to you earlier on is not chapter as in our modern understanding, but basically it is broken up into different like portions of a narrative. Okay, so what is the Eusebian canon table? Okay, Eusebian canon tables. If you have the Nestle Aland Novum Testamentum Graeci, you know that there's a Eusebian canon table at the back. Okay? But for those of you who don't know what it is, let me just describe it to you. Or let Professor Metzger, the late Professor Metzger, describe it for you. It is to Eusebius of Caesarea that we owe an important innovation introduced into manuscripts of the Gospels. This was a device for showing which passages in each Gospel are similar to passages in other Gospels. Okay. Taking over the system usually attributed to Ammonius of Alexandria of dividing the text of the Gospels into numbered sections. Okay. For example, we have 355 sections in Matthew, 233 in Mark, 342 in Luke, and 232 in John. Eusebius drew up 10 tables of canon, okay, canonies in Greek. presenting in Canon 1 the references by numerals to more or less parallel passages found in all four Gospels. In Canon 2, passages common to Matthew, Mark, and Luke, or the Synoptic Gospel. In Canon 3, passages common to Matthew, Luke, and John, and so on for almost all possible combinations of Gospels. The final table gives references to matter peculiar to each Gospel alone. So, in a nutshell, basically that is what a Eusebian canon table. To describe to you in modern sense, if you have used Throckmorton, Gospel parallels, similar concept, okay, at least the concept is similar. I'm not saying that it is exactly similar, but the concept is similar. Okay, now we move on. What is the Euthalian apparatus? Okay. The Euthalian apparatus is Greek manuscripts of the books of the Book of Acts and the epistles sometimes contain a collection of editorial materials that circulated under the name of Euthalius or Evagrius, now generally dated to the middle of the 4th century. This consists of prologues, lists of quotations from other parts of the Bible, tables of lections, and lists of chapters with summary headings of their contents. Attached to the Euthalian prologue to the Pauline epistles, is a Matrium Pauli, which has been thought to date from the year 396, or from 458, or 670. But the reasons for identifying the author of this text with that of the rest of the Euthalian material now seems insufficient. Several manuscripts contain a variety of other miscellaneous, for example, help for the readers. To put you into perspective, basically if you have, for example, the New Testament, Introduction to the New Testament by Professor Bart Ehrman, the textbook, you have like sections, boxes, right, that actually aids the reader as to what it is, right? So basically that's what the concept basically is. But this one is more of a kind of an apparatus, okay? So we don't need to know hypothesis and lectionary equipment, because this is not really common. Glosses, lexica, onomastica, and commentaries. A gloss, in the technical sense used here, is a marginal note employed for explanation or illustration. The use of marginal notes can be traced to classical times when they were employed to explain for Greek students the meaning of obsolete, dialectical, or foreign words, especially such as occurred in the Homeric poems. Subsequently, these notes were collected and issued in the form of a kind of lexicon for a given author, a dictionary in a book, so to speak. It was Aristophanes of Byzantium who, in his important work entitled Leses, raised glossography, I hope I pronounced it right, glossography to the level of lexicography. Thereafter, significant advances in Greek lexicography were made by Hesychius of Alexandria, which is from the 5th century, so on and so forth. In the case of the transmission of the Greek text of the Greek Bible, there was a similar development from random glosses standing in the margins of manuscripts to the collection of such notes in alphabetic sequence. Fruits of such labors were subsequently added to Hesychius' book, as a biblical supplement to his classical Greek lexicon. So that is basically a gloss. Now, what is an onomastica? Onomastica are special collections of glosses explaining the meaning of the names of persons and places. For example, you have this book also written by Professor Metzger, or edited by Professor Metzger and Michael Coogan, places and persons of the Bible, something like that, published by Oxford University Press. Okay? But you have these portions in books, for example, right? So whereby if you come across the name Peter, who is this person? And then you have at the sides here, okay, Peter or whoever, like Jerusalem, where is it? Right? So basically that's what it is. The preponderance of Semitic names in the Old and New Testament presented to Greek readers abundant subject matter for such inquiry. Yeah. Biblical onomastica contain a high percentage of doubtful and or erroneous information. Okay. In addition to such lexicographic glosses, okay, this is on lexicography, which we don't need to go in depth. Okay. All right, so basically we've gone through as a starting point. If you're interested in textual criticism or knowing more about manuscripts of the Greek Bible, okay, hopefully this video benefit you, and hopefully you have the chance to visit library and borrow this book, Manuscripts of the Greek Bible, An Introduction to Paleography. Now, I'm not recommending that you buy this book because, like I've mentioned, there are tons of other books that have been produced that is way better than this. Okay. I have my own reservation as to the images found in this book. If I can just show them to you, the images are not necessarily high quality. In fact, I wouldn't say that they are high quality at all. But thankfully, with modern technology, such as the internet, we are able to view these manuscripts online. And nowadays, if you are caught up with modern productions of literatures, you'll find that a lot of books nowadays no longer have images. Okay? Because you are able to access these images online. Okay? And it reduces the cost, the printing cost, and it is much more affordable. This book is actually by I would say the skeletal text was actually written, or actually first published in 1981. He probably wrote this way or a period before it being published. Okay? And so you can see that this is actually about 40 years old, and during this period they need the images to be in this book because there was no internet. But now we have internet, we don't really need to spend the money to actually purchase this. Now, the reason why I have this, right, is because I bought it with my own money as for all the other books, is because I'm very interested, and which is why I have. Right? If you are very interested, I would also ask you to think again. But anyway, you make the choice that you make. But do I recommend this? Definitely. But like I said, there are many other books that have been written written regarding a similar subject that is way superior than this. But anyway, rant aside, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.